Hey everybody, Caleb here. Today I've got something a little bit bigger, and two of them. If you've been around a little while, you've probably seen this bass. I've played this in at least one video, and I think Troy's played this in one video. This bass you probably haven't seen, but it's also been around. They both need a little bit of setup work, and I thought, seeing as they're both basses, but they're both different kinds of basses, I would go ahead and try and put them in the same video, and we can talk about the differences between them. This is a bolt-on neck bass. This is a set neck. The truss rod adjustment's in a different spot. This has a shorter scale. There's some differences we're going to talk about, and they need a couple of different things, but a lot of the things they need are the same, so I didn't really want to stretch it out into two videos. I thought I'd go ahead and just knock out my bass setups all at once here. I'm going to go ahead and set these down, and we'll talk about them a little bit more as I get going, but I'm going to get going on loosening these strings so we can get to working on these basses. So we'll go ahead and get started on this red Epiphone bass. There's a lot of things that both of these basses need. Among those things is a good truss rod adjustment. This used to be a yardstick. Now it's 10 inches shy of a yardstick, but it still works as a good enough straight edge for me to check neck straightness. I had to take some length off because I kept running into stuff back there. So I can set this down on the frets and then just kind of look at it. This thing really needs just a little bit of a tighten on that truss rod. It has just a little bit too much relief. There's a lot more space in here than there is, as we get closer. So I could use just a little bit of a tighten on this one. I know the Yamaha, the black one, also needs that. So we'll get to that as we get to it. I also know that the action is fairly high on these. These basses definitely can be a little bit more temperamental on action here, in that it probably needs to be a little bit higher because these strings move a lot more. You can see there's a lot more movement in those strings as they're bigger, but they still need to be playable. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my measuring tool in here. We're sitting at about 125 thousandths of an inch on that bass string, that low E string. I really want that to be closer to 100 thousandths of an inch. That's about 0.254 millimeter. That's a lot closer to where I would want that. It could maybe be a hair lower than that, but that would be much better, so you're not having to push quite so far. The highest string, the G string, is sitting about the same height, about 125 thousandths of an inch. And I would like it to be a little closer to 80 thousandths of an inch, 85 thousandths of an inch. That's about 0.203 millimeters. So the action on this is pretty high. It's kind of hard to play as you get up and a little bit higher because you got to be pushing harder, and on these thicker strings you really notice it. This should be adjustable though. There's plenty of adjusters back here. I think I can go ahead and lower those down. Now, because these are individuals, I will have to measure the inside strings as well to get them roughly in the ballpark, and I can do that with this. I'm just going to basically pick this string up and measure the next one, and it's sitting about 120 thousandths of an inch. That D string is crazy high. It's like 140 thousandths of an inch. So basically all these strings need to come down quite a bit. I'm not too worried about the first fret either. It's also a little high. I don't think it's high off of the nut. I think it's high because of this adjustment back here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and loosen these strings up now. Because the truss rod needs adjusted, I'm going to loosen the strings. If I were loosening the truss rod, I could do that on tight strings. But because I need to tighten it just a hair, I really want to loosen the tension off of these. I'm not going to go ahead and take these strings off. These are flat wound bass strings. And as I understand it, bass players don't really replace strings all that often. That's another one of those, the older they are, the little bit more mellow they get, and usually they like that. On top of that, bass strings are a little expensive, so If you can not replace your bass strings, you're probably better for it. Only replace them when you absolutely have to. That's pretty normal for the bass. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start loosening these strings up. And we'll work on the truss rod next. So this is a Les Paul bass. So you notice it's got a Les Paul marking on it, and as well as on the truss rod cover. So, you know, like most Les Pauls, the truss rod adjustment is here underneath the cover on the headstock. So to get to that, just like most electric guitar Les Pauls, you take out the screws. Move that cover out of the way, and then we should have access to the truss rod, which will be right in there. Now, all I need to do is get the right size Allen key, give that a little turn, and we'll be in business. So it doesn't take much. You just want to do small adjustments. This one was a little ways off, so I am going to, do maybe a little more than I would usually do. But that's about it. You really don't want to be, cranking on this. If it doesn't turn very easily, don't try and make it turn. More than likely, you'll break it off or break something you'll wish you hadn't. For the most part, they should spin fairly easily, and make your adjustment so you can move on from there. So, on this Yamaha bass, the truss rod adjustment is actually at the base of the neck, where the neck meets the body. Now, I would say most electric guitars adjust the truss rod at the headstock, but it is far more common to see these body truss rod adjustments on basses. I'm not saying that everyone's going to be this or everyone's going to be that, but from my experience, you see these body adjustments far more often on basses. And in case you were wondering, it is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. The tighter you pull it, the more the truss rod will pull the neck like this. And of course, this is an exaggeration, and it happens further up the neck. But the looser you get it, the more it'll allow the strings to pull the neck like this. So that's what your truss rod does. That's all it does, is it adjusts the relief towards the middle of the neck. If you're having more issue, especially down here, you may have a bigger issue than truss rod adjustment. Neck angle may become an issue. On some electric instruments, on a lot of electric instruments, they're bolt-on necks, so that's really not that big of a deal. This one is included on things like the Epiphone bass. That could be a bigger problem, as it has a set neck. This one didn't really need as much adjustment as the other one did. I could tell that right away. Part of that is that this has lighter strings on it. This also has a shorter scale than the Epiphone bass. So it doesn't need to have quite as much tension in the truss rod as the Epiphone does. So now that the truss rod has been adjusted, while the strings are still loose, I'm going to do a little bit of work on these fret ends. They're causing me a little bit of problem, I've noticed. Now, neither of these basses are expensive instruments. This Yamaha came right off the rack at the big chain guitar store, and it was probably the best setup one there, and it's still not perfect. The Epiphone was bought secondhand, and it's probably a little bit better than this one is in regards to what I'm about to do. These fret ends are a little bit sharp, especially as I get higher up in here, I've noticed. These lower ones are probably a little better, which makes a little bit more sense when you're talking about a beginner bass. So basically, I'm just going to take my round over file that I use for rounding over fret ends, and I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to knock these edges off. I do this a lot on cheaper instruments, so I won't spend too much time on it. I'm just going to quickly knock this out. So this bass, especially more than the other, probably mostly because it was secondhand and because it's played more, these frets need polished. They're a little more grimy than on the Yamaha. I don't know how well you can see that, but they don't have the shine that the Yamaha does, and even that, the Yamaha could use a little bit of help in that department. So I'm going to try to move these strings out of the way so that I can polish these frets. So I move those strings out of the way for the most part. They're going to fight me, of course, but they won't be in the way for what I'm about to do. Now, I have already checked, and these frets are very level. There's no buzzing issues I'm having, and I've gone through and rocked them all. They're doing very good there. What I just want to do is kind of polish these up. So you've seen me do this before as well. I'm going to do the usual polish here. I go through these pads and I have them all marked on the sides. They come with, and tell you what grit it is. It's kind of a proprietary grit. It's not the same as sandpaper, but it says what it is on the face of it, which as you start rubbing it into things becomes very evident. That's not helpful because it rubs it off or covers it up. So what I've gone ahead and done is just marked them with Sharpie. You can see this one has 1 mark. The next one will have 2, and so on all the way up through, I think it's 5 or 6. Anyways, this helps me keep track of, what I'm what I'm using here. And I've said this before as well. I like to just polish them with these pads. There's plenty of other ways you could do this. You could even tape the whole board up and use the polishing wheel on the Dremel and get a really, really high polish on these. But for time invested, this is far and away my favorite way to do this. The time it would take to tape the whole board up and to, polish every single fret to a high mirror polish with the Dremel is not really worth it for the playability you get out of it compared to this. This doesn't take me very much time at all. And I'm not too concerned about the board. With the high grits, you're not really going to do any damage to the board. You might kind of gray it up, which is just a little bit of, the dirtiness coming off of it. And that can be cleaned up really easily. And actually, for most boards, could use the help cleaning it up with what I'm going to do to clean this up. So as I finish up with this last sanding pad, these frets have a much nicer shine to them. I don't know how well you can see it, but the fretboard also has a lot more gray to it. Now, this fretboard had a couple of issues before I even started polishing. There's actually a little wear from what looks like strings, maybe pressed too hard. And I would have said that there was wear from round wound strings, whereas these are flat wounds, because that's what it looks like throughout there. So it really needed cleaned up before I even started, but now that I'm done polishing, it needs a little bit more cleaning up. So what I'm going to do is take this razor blade and just very carefully clean in between the frets. And I just work my way across that. You don't want to sit in one spot too far, as this has a nice radius to it, because you will work the radius out of it. So start on one side and work across that board. Now I can see in the camera already that these are dark and this is lighter. This is cleaner than these are. Now when I'm done with this, I will come back and oil this board, which will make these lighter spots look a lot darker, but then it'll also look a lot cleaner. So now that that's all cleaned up, I'm ready to re-oil the board, and as per usual, I'll be using this Be Good wood oil. I use this for pretty much everything. It does a really good job, and I really like it. I'm just going to put a bead. It doesn't take a whole lot. You don't need too much. You just rub it in there. That conditions the wood. Makes it look really good as well. So once you're done rubbing it in, there will pretty much always be an excess left on the top. So what you want to do is take a clean cloth and just wipe off that excess. That also helps kind of get it in all the hard to reach places with the cloth. So conditioning the board increases the longevity of it. Make sure you won't have any issues that come with older raw wood. And it really does make it look a lot better, I think. It looks closer to a finished wood, but still being raw. It comes out looking very good. I like, it's got a nice little sheen to it. It feels good. It looks good. You just want to make sure you get it nice and clean. Otherwise, you'll have a little bit of an oily experience. Speaking of oil, as soon as I am done here, which I am, these tuners on this Yamaha are a bit stiff. So I would like to put a little oil in them. Now, these are closed back. That's not too big of a deal. I just grab a screwdriver and open these up. So I can take that cover off now. And I can look at these tuners. I can see it's actually got a little bit of grease on there, but it looks very dirty and inconsistent. I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit. And I'm going to add just a little dot of some 3-in-1 oil. Not too much. And I'll work that in. Make sure everything back here is snug. And then we can basically just put that right back together. So I think I'm ready to tune these back up now and start working on the actual setup. So I'll go ahead and get that taken care of and we'll go on from there. So we're tuned up now. I don't know if you're even going to be able to hear them. Usually I do that and you can hear that it's in tune, but these basses are awful quiet. Anyways, I've got the measuring tool back out, so we're going to start trying to make the string height a reasonable number here. This bass is awful high. But with that truss rod adjustment, it's going to change some of it. We're sitting at about 90 thousandths on that 12th fret for the G string. So that's not too bad. It could actually come down a hair, and I am going to go ahead and take it down a hair. This is all adjustable down here at the bridge. I'll try to move it so a place you can kind of see what I'm really doing here. So I think you can kind of see now this bridge a little bit better. It's got adjustable, basically Allen heads in all of the saddles. So I can very easily take the correct Allen key here and just adjust it. Thing is, you have to get it going in the right direction. I don't really have an issue with loosening these things up to tension because all you're going to do is drop in tuning. If you were going to tighten these, I would be maybe a little bit more worried about string tension. I am going to actually go ahead and plug this in and make sure that we're up to pitch still, because I want to make sure my measurements are accurate to how it's going to be played. And then we'll just basically measure it again. This will be slightly off camera, so you can't really see it, but that's looking way better. We're actually sitting at just under 80 thousandths. And it's not an issue so long as it doesn't buzz. And so far it's looking really good. What we'll do now is I'll move up to the D string. Once again, this is slightly off camera, and I apologize for that, but this is the best way to show what's going on. Setting at about 100 thousandths. I'd like to lower that a little bit. I'd like it to be under 100. So I'm just going to loosen these a little bit. It's sitting about 95. That's probably pretty good. I'd actually like to come down a little bit more. As the G string sitting about 80, it'd be nice to come down just a hair more, maybe closer to 90 thousandths. It's about perfect 90 thousandths. Now I'll switch sides for the bass side. I'm trying to get this where maybe you can still see what I'm doing. About there. So I'll come in from this side now, the bass side. About 115 to 100, or about 105 to 110 thousandths of an inch. And I really want to get that down to almost 100. So I'll lower that. And to back that screw out, I'm going counterclockwise. That's about perfect. It just stops at 100. And that's what my measurements say I'm aiming for. That A string also says 100. I'm aiming more for like 95, 90. So it's not too big a difference, but it'll help. That's looking really good. I'm going to pick it up just to make sure it's right where I want it to be. It's playing good. So now that the action height is looking good, what I'm going to start to look at is intonation. So you want to make sure you're really, really in tune. And then what you'll do is you'll play it at the 12th fret. Make sure we're in tune, open, and then play it at the 12th fret. You can see that E string is a little flat. So we're going to need to move this saddle. Now this bridge is fairly easy to adjust. It's adjusted from the rear. The other bridge is adjusted with the same Allen key as the saddles. So if it's flat, the saddle is too far back. It needs to come forward. So to do that, I'll just take my screwdriver here. So I want to back that screw out of there, which will allow that saddle to move forward. So now we'll check the tuning again. Hasn't changed much. So I'll have to adjust it some more than I have. So I've had to move this thing up quite a bit now, but it seems to be working. So you can see there, it's coming out perfect and open. It's perfect. So I can move on to the A string now. And it's much of the same. We make sure it's really in tune. Hit it at 12. It's really flat. So we're going to have to let that one out too. There we go. That A's settling right where it needs to be. I'll go ahead and get these last two finished up, and then we can get done with this intonation. Well, now that we got these things intonated, I think they're just about good to go here. As per usual, I'll play one to send us off. I don't think I'll play this one because I've played this one before. So I'll go ahead and get this one set up and I'll play it a little bit. I don't know what I'm going to play because it's going to be just bass, but it'll be something. So I hope you enjoyed this little video working on a couple of basses. I know it's a lot of repetitive stuff, but this is just kind of what I've been working on, and I kind of need to get this done anyway. And, you know, there's a few tips that are kind of bass exclusive on here. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.